A word to the wise. We are an explicit podcast tackling choicey adult themes as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us yet. That point would be through chapter 27. So up until chapter 28 of Morningstar, the third installment of the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown.
Hey there, this is Cross.
And I'm PJ.
And we are Words and Whiskey, a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike. We tackle fiction novels and love to talk about what we're drinking. Think of us as your drunk weekly book club.
And this week, I think I'd call it a pretty good week because nobody died. Or none of the people we care about. Maybe some weird slug snail things. But Ragnar gave us a pretty good spook. You could say he died, but came back to life. So, you know what? Net positive.
It's always a good week on the show when we don't lose a main character, right?
Right.
It's always a good week. So today is our fourth episode covering Morningstar by Pierce Brown, and we're here to discuss the second of 3 episodes covering part 2 Rage. I broke this part into 3 just because there's simply so much here, and we'll be covering chapters 20 through 27.
Yes.
But first, let's talk about what we're drinking.
Yes, let's. So I was perusing my little cocktail book. Found one that had all the ingredients of, like, I had all the ingredients for it, and it's called the New Yorker. It is 1 part scotch, a tablespoon of lime juice, a tablespoon of sugar, the shredded rind of half of a lemon, and or like a grated microplaned rind, and then lemon twist. It's not that good. I don't know if I just didn't have fine enough of a microplane, but it's just, there's just too much pulpy shit on top, and all it tastes like is lemon. You don't get the scotch at all. So I don't know. It's fine. Whatever. But what I'm really excited to follow that up with is 2016 Tweak from Avery Brewing Company. And this is one of my favorite barrel-aged beers of all time. It's a bourbon barrel-aged coffee stout. Espresso stout, really. I guess this bottle they say coffee, but usually they say espresso. Anyway, real heavy flavors. I think this one clocks in at like 16%. So, it's a heavy hitter. I'm excited for it.
So here's a fun coffee fact for everyone, because to add to my list of things I'm a snob about, coffee is one of them. Espresso beans and coffee beans are the exact same thing.
Right.
It's all to do with the pressure that you put into the system when extracting the coffee.
Right. I'm just saying, usually they refer to it as an espresso stout.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally.
And this would just says coffee.
Right. So all I'm saying is that it might not necessarily connotate a change in anything.
Right, but it's the pressure and the fineness of the grain of the grind, correct?
No, it's just pressure.
Really?
Yeah. Fineness of the grind is actually different even depending on the type of coffee bean you're using and the type of prep you're doing. For instance, cold brew is typically prepped with a very coarse grain because it's going to sit in it and seep it out of it anyway, so there's no reason to finely grain it. You get more surface area out of it, so it's better. Yeah. So espresso is generally very finely ground, but there are other drinks as well that are very finely ground.
Yeah. What about you?
I'm having a Manhattan. I actually went searching for mint because I wanted to make a mint julep, and none of the grocery stores around me had mint. I went to 4, which is nuts.
Stupid grocery stores.
I know.
I would have gone to one. I
spent like 2 hours looking for mint.
No mint here. I guess I'm doing something else.
Well, there are like 3 really close to me. There's an Aldi. Walmart isn't really a grocery store, but they have most of the essentials. So I went there second after the Aldi. And then I went to Lowe's is a grocery store here. Not. I need to clarify. There's a grocery store chain named Lowe's.
Is it
not that
same?
Lowe's are also, yes, not that Lowe's are also grocery stores.
Interesting.
So I went there. They also didn't have mint. And then I went to Harris Teeter, which is across the street, and they also didn't have mint. And I gave up. And so I made a Manhattan because I had the stuff here to do that, which is, just a classic. It's, vermouth, sweet vermouth, bourbon, a little bit of bitters, shaken. It's good. I had an ice cube in it. The ice cube is now gone because we took so long doing notes.
We did. By the way, you would all be proud of me. I very explicitly did not drink my entire drink during note taking this week. I saved it.
Very, very true. And then I'm following that up with something that I had a couple of weeks ago, the Sycamore Sticky Crystals Hazy IPA. It's nice. Solid. What I would say, though, before we move into last week's predictions, just a little plug here. If you haven't already listened to it, we did an interview podcast with High Key Obsessed. It was a great time hanging out with Thomas, getting to talk about a lot of our other favorite fantasy series. You can check that out again at High Key Obsessed Pod.
Yes. And if you want to just hear me rant about how much I fucking hate the first Avengers movie, that's another great place for you to do it.
True.
We'll talk about that for a little while. Oh, it was a great time. I am so happy we got to join him on that.
Yeah, we talk for kind of littered throughout the entire podcast, but we do talk in great length about Red Rising as well. Probably a third of the podcast or so, maybe a fourth. Yeah,
less about the specifics of the stories and more about the series as a whole, which was
the bits that we love. Yeah, whatnot.
Sort of a top level look at it, which was a lot of fun.
Totally. So with that, we have a lot of ground to cover. So let's get into last week's predictions here. So now that we know Mustang is live, what comes next? You said a very delicate, fairly emotionless conversation about truces, and you were...
I'm pretty wrong. I was
very wrong.
Yeah. All right.
Very wrong.
Cheers.
It's a drink from you. Cheers.
Got to pick out the pulpy bits of lemon rind.
Nice. It'd be really nice if they stuck to your teeth, you had to get them out. That'd be awesome.
Oh, that'd be so good. You're right. You know what? I'm coming around on it. This is now my favorite drink, Crossland, just because you said that.
Really?
No, fuck that.
Of course not. Okay, so next question. What do they do now that they have Quicksilver? You said, do what they can to get information on the Jackal's operation, of which you were...
I mean, I'm not wrong. I am wrong.
But you are wrong in the sense where you're kind of in the realm of maybe torture him.
I mean,
for the info.
Severo tried to.
He tried, but you're wrong. You drink.
All right, fine.
Cheers. Next question was about Daxo and Cavax, which what you said, we kind of attached it to the Quicksilver because they were also, taken. I think it was actually just Cavax is what we kind of find out. It was obscure as to whether Daxo was taken or not. You said they don't ultimately have problems joining Darrow. We do find that to be
kind of true.
True. Yeah. At the very least, kind of true. I think fully true. And so I'm going to take a drink for that. Okay. So cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, next question. What will Adrius's punishment be for losing Darrow and Victra? This is a question from a long time ago, I think the first episode of the Morningstar show. And we kind of decided to resolve this one in this section. What you said at the time is, even though it's not his fault, dissection. The operating table was already ready and prepped, and Octavia isn't one to waste funds. So, I think the...
I so wanted that to be the case.
I think everyone would love for the Jackal to be dissected. I think that'd be a great way for him to go out. Just chopped up into little bits.
But you know what? I think we're wrong, or I'm wrong.
Yeah, so we're basically what we're saying is it was clear that it wasn't going to be dissection. It looked like it was going to be imprisonment. It hasn't necessarily been fully paid off yet, but it feels like we know that it's not going to be as extreme as your prediction is.
Yeah.
So we're calling you wrong.
Yeah. I feel like he'd probably beg for dissection after a little while.
Maybe he just plays the game with the oracles for years. That'd be bad.
Yeah. Do you think he'd...
All right.
Do you think he'd survive it?
No. Dude can't keep a straight face. He lies all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
He'd die immediately. So with that, let's get into the chapters. Chapter 20, Descent. right away, the clock has begun to tick for our heroes at the beginning of this chapter. Darrow is sure to be discovered and reported alive to the outside world. We're already seeing it at a very low level with the Sons of Ares that are present, as he is now known to be alive within, kind of proximity, and the word is going to spread through the troops.
Yeah, pretty quickly.
Yeah. That has the wider spread implications, of course, that we are going to see later in the section where he decides to own the message as opposed to kind of wandering out. But still, it's definitely something worth noting and mentioning, is that his hand is kind of being forced to make the play that he makes.
Yeah, and that seems to be the case a lot here. But I don't think much can be done about that. Things are moving quickly, and he's getting kind of thrown into the fray of things. And they're giving him as much time as they can for the carving and everything like that. But society is continuing on trying to squash the rebellion. They can't just wait for Darrow to be ready.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that wouldn't be the right or proper thing for them to do. So it makes sense. Mm-hmm. And ultimately it's a good thing here that starts to happen. But we do kind of see with Rollo even guessing, right?
Yeah.
That it was Darrow to that extent. Makes sense. So we go from there to Sero ordering Devro.
Sero?
Jesus Christ.
Sero
what
and Devro?
You'd think I had already drank so much, but I just took our shot and I've had a sip of my beverage so far. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you didn't even switch it up in the document. No. Typically, you'll trip me up with something like that, but that didn't even happen. This is just my brain taking a dump. Yep. So Severo ordering Darrow around. What'd you kind of make of that?
I think it had to happen. I think, especially given the circumstance that Severo has found himself in. He's been leading this rebellion for a year now, 9 months of which they had assumed Darrow was dead. So he has taken on this leadership role, and it clearly has a big burden to him. And there's clearly a lot that he's wrestling with there, but he can't just give up his leadership position and give way to Darrow. That would make him look incredibly weak and probably lose a lot of the respect that he's tried to foster from a lot of the Howlers. Mm-hmm. So I think at least until an explicit restructuring happens, which it does later on in this section, but until then he kind of has to maintain that leadership role. And Darrow, being the one that came into this, has to be subservient to it.
Yeah, totally. I find it a very interesting kind of fracturing of their friendship that is found and resonates throughout the entire reading. We see kind of a fracturing and a rebuilding that reminds me of some of it has similarities to the fracturing with Roke. Do you see any of that?
Yeah, a little bit, but in kind of a different way. The one with Roke, the problems with Roke seem to have sort of arose out of neglect of the friendship. Mm-hmm. This seems to be coming from strict absence. There's been so much that has happened, and Severo's had to do it without Darrow. So maybe there's a little bit of animosity there. Darrow is seeing how things have progressed without him, and they're still moving forward. So there's probably a little bit of animosity there. So there's just kind of tension. Not because of anyone's direct actions, but because of the fact that Darrow's just been gone for a year.
Right. He hasn't been around to actually sort out all of the various problems or to talk anything through with Severo, working through any of the smaller details or minutia. But absolutely.
At the same time, when Darrow comes back in and he tries to reassert himself as sort of the leader that people are looking for him to be, that's going to quickly kind of come across as Darrow usurping power from Severo. Mm-hmm. And even if that's not the way Severo wants to think about it, that's inevitably going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense to me. So when we look at their kind of differences in relationship, we obviously have Roke, who is very much being neglected actively by Darrow, and we have neglect on Severo's side that's just from circumstance for the most part, and all of the other compounding stress of being Ares on Severo as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a good comparison. We move on to the next little bit here. So we get introduced to Cavax again in the cell, being interviewed, and he mentions Reynard, the name of Cavax's ship. Did you know that it was named after a 14th century folktale about foxes?
No, but I believe it, and I love it even more now.
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is that it's 14th century stuff about a fox, an anthropomorphic fox going through a number of, medieval-ish
Star Fox
fairy tales. No, Reynard. Come on.
Well, but Star Fox
but
is
also,
an anthropomorphic fox going through stories.
True, but that's in the future. I mean, fair point.
What's the
fair
future?
Point.
It's probably the past for Darrow at this point.
For someone eventually. Super interesting though. Good call. So
what's really not a good interesting? Call. That's a bullshit.
No, I think it's a great call because time is an illusion.
It's not.
Well, is it though? I like Reynard specifically for another reason. It means friend, the connotation is so connected in France, and they liked it so much that they actually replaced their word for fox that they had before with Reynard. So Reynard means fox in French. So I've been told by the internet at large and the dictionary and everything else. But the old word may be used, but originally it was just a Latin word.
Interesting.
Yeah, fairly interesting.
It's
so
pretty cool.
Cavax has a fox ship.
I mean, what else would he have? Let's be honest here.
I mean, naturally.
We still haven't met Sophocles this book yet, which angers
True.
me.
We did get a mention of Sophocles, though.
Did. That's true.
Yeah, briefly. How did you feel about Cavax's reveal of Virginia and Mustang's intentions?
Virginia and Mustang?
/ Mustang. Yep. He calls her Virginia. Obviously, Darrow thinks of her as Mustang. Mm-hmm. Inside this section, their implications and Severo ignoring them as well.
I guess I can see the sort of reasoning behind Severo choosing to ignore them reaching out, especially with how deep he's dug himself into this role of Ares and being against Gold Society and leading a terrorist organization. And these are prominent people within Gold Society who he doesn't entirely trust because of the way things ended between Mustang and Darrow and Ragnar in the mine. He doesn't see, I don't think he really knows Cavax as well as Darrow does, but also he's a prominent leader. It's the same reason why he is so incredibly slow to trust Quicksilver and is only kind of able to after being absolutely forced into it. So there's I feel like a decent amount of paranoia, the understanding that Darrow has such intense feelings for Mustang that things could get muddled and Darrow could overlook red flags and things like that in case something were to be going wrong. It makes total sense to ignore them from that perspective. It's wrong. I think he's wrong to do it, but I can totally see his rationale.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It is fair and fitting that Severo would do that because he has, especially we find this out more later, but he has this entire betrayal angle where he just sees all of Darrow's mistakes and is actively refusing to make them, despite the strategic implications of the choices that he's making. It's mostly out of rage that he's making these decisions.
Right.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. I love this bit here that Cavax says inside of the cell. He's talking about how all of the other Golds are educated, and he mentions that would I read Greek stories to my children in Mustang when I was raising them? No, I told them the tales of Arthur, of the Nazarene, of Vishnu, strong heroes who wished only to protect the weak. And Mustang has more than that. She's proven EO right. Yeah, the end of that being internal monologue, but it's a fantastic little bit that just kind of exposes why Cavax is positive for the kind of democratic ideals as opposed to someone like Lauren.
Yeah. I will say he seems so much more lucid here than in most other instances with him. He doesn't seem like an unhinged fucking crazy old man as much as sort of a down-to-earth, really critical thinking elder of the society.
Yeah. I mean, at the time you're blaming it on Daxo, drugging him.
Well, drugging him, but also just there was the mention
Like
of
keeping
him
him entertained with the
getting
jelly
hit in the
beans.
head several times
Yeah.
and never
Yeah.
being the same afterwards. But I don't know. There's a lot that could have been done.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree. I think that it's interesting, but there are some things that come through, very clear, and I feel like this is one of them,
Yeah, for sure.
So along with Cavax, we kind of leave that. I love Rollo throughout this entire thing, right? Kind of supporting the Reaper. It's important to note that we kind of skipped over the fact that he didn't know who Darrow was last week when we talked about it, and that Darrow was obscured the whole time from most everyone except for the actual group of Howlers that was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rollo, he's the one that was, he works for Julii, right? No.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Did he mention that he knew who Victor was as well?
I think that he did make mention of it.
Yeah. He's an interesting character, and I'm really excited to see what more comes from him.
Yeah, I think that he has a lot of kind of nuance and depth here. He's kind of used on the periphery to be kind of a stand-in for the majority of Reds and kind of the jaded nature that those higher Reds have versus the lower Reds that are kept underground.
Yeah,
So,
it doesn't seem like there's that name, the distinction in name between high red and low red seems so important and makes it sound so grand and so much of a gap, but there's really fucking not. It's just their job.
Yeah.
It's just whether or not they're a miner.
Yeah, and he's a very smart, down-to-earth dude. I mean, he seems, like you said, the division of kind of labor of whether or not they're a miner seems to be when they're held back from society. He seems very intelligent, and that's not to say anything of the other Reds. He's just got a different sort of jade to him. He doesn't talk about, or he doesn't feel like he would talk about the Veil in the same way that a mining Red would.
Yeah,
feels like he's an entirely different perspective.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of that probably is derived from the fact that the low Reds have so little access and really effectively no access to anything outside of the mines themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So all they have to look for is spirituality and religion, I guess, that they bring upon themselves.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And then the chapter ends with the reveal that Quicksilver is a founding member of the Sons of Ares.
Mm-hmm. I think he refers to himself as the first son.
He does in the next chapter. He was the first son of Ares.
Yeah. Pretty
fascinating. Did you see that coming?
I did not. Not one bit. It makes total sense though. Every little weird thing, be it Mateo, kind of his oddities within society as well. Like we were talking about his taste in art last week. Like it didn't seem to really fit him.
I thought that was going to be something that you were going to key into directly. When you started to bring that up, I was like, oh man, I had never really, I mean, obviously the book kind of puts it semi-textually to make it very clear, but it doesn't prelude the fact that he's a son of Ares.
No. Yeah. There's no indication there that would have been the case, but looking back on it and saying like, oh, this is an interesting thing.
Yeah, I think looking back on that conversation, that would be an interesting episode to reapproach with the kind of additional knowledge, because I do think it paints him in a very different light, which you made me realize live time on this read through. Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. So Severo's flash of brutality here is so different at the beginning of the chapter when he punches Quicksilver in the face 3 times. It's familiar to us in the sense that we've seen similar brutality throughout the series, but the reason that it's different is because we're inhabiting Darrow's perspective and looking at it. And he, after the year in the box, is just so different.
Yeah, he is timid as shit.
You think it's timidity from the box?
No, but I think it comes across that way. I think it's a lot more just internalizing things and not quite trusting his instincts as much, because there's so much that's been broken, I guess.
That's definitely fair. I also think I agree with you, or would extrapolate from what you're saying and say, I also don't think the Darrow from Golden Sun would beat him up like Severo is in this moment. I don't think that Darrow would ever lay into Quicksilver.
Yeah.
So
that's True. Quick aside about Quicksilver. How do you imagine him?
So I love the description of the bulldog eyes because it gives kind of the perception of like rings under his eyes and kind of some like jowls. He is a larger man, right, with a bald head.
Yeah, so that's where once this description started happening, it completely threw off what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Because like almost to a T, what I was thinking of was Adrian Veidt or Ozymandias.
Yeah, yeah.
Based on just his demeanor and the way he lived and his wealth and everything, like I imagined him almost exactly like Adrian Veidt from Watchmen.
That's fair.
And this is not, that's not what he looks like.
No. And he kind of, to some degree, like he's not the master manipulator that Veidt is by any means.
No, I'm talking strictly looks.
Oh, yeah, right. I was just saying they occupied like a similar, faculty or facility in the story.
Exactly. And I think that's why it kind of dug itself in my head that way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that it's very interesting. Mm-hmm. So the words are a punch to the gut. Fitchner said the exact phrase when explaining why he didn't tell me about Titus. What if there were two bodies to the Sons of Ares bodies, the low colors and the high? Kept them apart in case one was compromised. Darrow's just kind of coming to grips with the fact that it's logical. It's something that he would have done.
Yeah. Like there are a couple of points in here where he says like, that's what I would have done. Even if it's a little bit out there and hard to believe. Like ultimately like his intuition and tactical thinking of like, what would I have done in this situation? Oh, probably exactly this. Mm-hmm. I think probably saved Quicksilver's life to a certain extent.
Well, yeah, I mean, without a doubt, Darrow is spending almost this entire time advocating for Quicksilver. He's fighting for him in the sense that he's like putting together all of these pieces, and Severo is still ignoring them, even though he's like clearly, okay, the through line with Mateo, the through line with hearing Fitchner say the same thing, all of these different components, and Severo just still is not listening.
Yeah, that's a good point and good question to bring up. Mateo, that is Quicksilver's husband. Mm-hmm. That is the first non-persecuted intercolor relationship that we've heard of, isn't it?
Yes. But I think that part of that is that it's secret.
Is it? Okay, because it didn't seem secret.
No, I would say that he's being open about it
as a means of.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's my interpretation at the very least. It doesn't feel like he has anything to gain from hiding that information here, right? So he's open about it.
Though they're both high colors, though, aren't they?
No, pinks are low colors.
Pinks are low? Even the roses?
Yep.
Okay.
You're just a higher pink.
Gotcha.
Inner tier. Yeah. So he, like, Mateo is definitely pink. It's definitely not okay to have inner color marriages to any degree. Like, Bryn and the gold, of course.
The gold?
The gold Fitchner.
Fucking Aries.
My God. I feel like my brain is just collapsing in on itself this week. It's good. It's good. We're here. We're talking about it.
Bryn and the gold is how you described Severo's parents.
Yeah. I did that, didn't I?
It's like,
here we are.
That's like the worst possible way to describe them.
We're going to move on. The whole thing with the marriage between Mateo and Quicksilver, I think, is really another way of kind of buying into the idea that he's a son, right? Mm-hmm. And he is a son because he wants to be openly married to, Mateo.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no... That just adds on to his list of reasons.
But he doesn't even mention that.
Again, I think that's
strictly
implied.
As a capitalist.
Right.
Which I thought was a really cool monologue.
No, it's an excellent monologue. And I think that we get a couple of different interesting splashes, and I want to get to the capitalist bit here in just a second. I've got a lot to break down there mentally. I really like the little splash of color that we get about Fitchner and Quicksilver's relationship throughout this section, and kind of where their grouping developed.
Okay.
As the original Sons of Ares, the relationship that Quicksilver didn't really set out to make the Sons of Ares, but because of the relationship with Fitchner, it kind of grew out of it.
So what I found really, really interesting is Fitchner, as we discussed before, is a peerless Skard, like one of the highest ranking
members
of the highest ranking level of society.
Yep.
And he is essentially working for Quicksilver. That doesn't seem like something most golds would do. Work for a color.
No.
Work for somebody a color below them.
So while definitely true, the interesting part about the backstory with Fitchner is we actually got a lot of it in the last book, right? So in Golden Sun, we figured out that he went out to the Rim and started working out there for a while. I believe it's the Rim, and was working at like a industrial plant, basically running it. And being owned by Sun Industries to some degree makes sense, right? And that there would be employees within kind of that space. Think about all of the media that Quicksilver controls, which has made a big point throughout here as well as Golden Sun.
Yeah.
Like there are clear components where people plug and play and money becomes important. However, he does say that he literally can't fight because he could be eliminated by even a minor house feud, very simply, because he doesn't have the firepower. They kind of allow for Silvers to continue because of the sort of accumulated wealth and their ability to do so. It's their place. They're kind of in charge of making all the gears and cogs continue to spin,
right?
And make the gold's money.
Yeah.
In addition to themselves.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It's totally interesting. I definitely agree with you. It's weird that I wouldn't say it's weird, but it's definitely, at least so far as we've been presented, a unique situation for a peerless guard to be in.
Right.
And I believe part of that is because Fitchner was not from a renowned house, even though he's a peerless guard. So, as you had mentioned, he is an excellent capitalist and a self-described capitalist.
Self-proclaimed, I'd say.
He definitely has those tendencies. He leans into a couple of different points, and he has a great 1.5-page monologue that I'd like to get into. Before we do that, we've got to talk about the length that he's been a son, right? Been a Son of Ares for more than 20 years. That requires patience, a long-eyed view. You've been one for less than a year. And look what's happened. You, Mr. Barca, are a bad investment. And I just love that because it complicates the entire history of the Rising.
It really does.
And it shits on Severo.
Yeah. He needs to hear it. I think Darrow says that. He could have interjected and stopped the conversation. If not right here explicitly, like within the same conversation. Like Severo needs to hear this shit. Like he's not acting like a sane person.
No, not at all. And that's only exemplified by the way that this chapter ends.
Right. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
And I just find it so interesting that he is an important component, but the gears of Darrow is an important component to the entire rebellion of the Sons of Ares and everything else. But the gears have been grinding for so long that Quicksilver would be sure to continue that regardless of what happened to Darrow.
Right.
It would just be something different. It would just be a new pivot, new angle.
Right.
He also mentions, before we go into the wonderful capitalist bit, do you think Quicksilver is right about the Jackal being the single greatest threat to the long-term goals of the Sons of Ares?
I think he's right about that, and I think you can expand it and say that he is the single greatest threat to everybody. I think he is in a very strangely unique position of being born into such high power, molded in such a way that so clearly he was a sociopath from the jump, based on the fact that that he got his own brother murdered through essentially several steps of a plan that, like, he knew this action would cause this, would cause this, which would cause his death. Like, it's not just hiring an assassin. Like, he was manipulative and sociopathic from the jump. And that contradicts the idea that he gained that sort of trait through the isolation caused by being sent off after the death of his brother as a means of saving Nero's heirs. So he's born into incredible wealth and power, has sociopathic tendencies, which are then probably magnified, I guess, by his isolation in growing up, and then magnified again within the Institute where he's in this situation where even though he's being helped and his win has been bought and paid for from the jump, he still finds himself in a tunnel like collapse and ends up fucking eating fellow students, which follows him forever in the media.
Seemingly
in his own father's conversation with him, like after graduate, like fucking everything is just building up to him being this fucking evil person who is also arch-governor of Mars.
Yeah, he's an abomination of a person.
No, that's Darrow.
Oh, right. Sorry, my bad. You're right.
No, he's a monster though. He's certainly a monster. Mm-hmm. And I know
without a doubt,
we got kind of called out a little bit on our talk of the alignment chart, and I completely agree. Even before we got the comments on it, I had been listening to the episode. I'm like, I don't think I agree with what I'm saying here. He's not like chaotic neutral or whatever we called him. Like he is, what would you call it? Like chaotic evil?
I mean, he could just be defined as straight, pure evil.
Yeah.
But chaotic to varying degrees.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of chaos to him. Anyway, I think it would take a little bit more of explicit delving into the alignment maps to really find a good place for him with information to back it up.
Yeah,
but for all of you who, like me, disagreed with what I said about the alignment chart, I'm on your side.
Thank you, Celine.
Was it Celine? Okay.
Yeah, it was. Thank you for the comment. And if you guys have any comments on the show too, feel free to send them to us. I know we say that at the end of the show every single time, but definitely do. We love chatting about it. And we'll definitely bring you up whenever something relevant comes up.
Yeah. Is Celine in the Discord?
Discord.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's why I didn't know who it was, because I actively avoid that because I don't want to get spoiled. And I'm excited to be able to join that Discord. So
after Morningstar, you're probably safe.
Perfect. But, awesome.
Yeah. So page 163, which is what we've been talking about for a while, is littered with gold. I mean, just the entire deluge that we get from Quicksilver in terms of his ideology and the way that he thinks about the world is just wonderful. He mentions the golds going about and making Mirkwoods and Olympuses to hunt beasts, right? And so that's a reference, and you didn't catch that reference, which is an obvious one that you should have gotten.
I listened to it, and I think I was probably just dozing off or something. So I missed that one. Obviously, I understand it, but yeah.
I think you take a drink.
Of course I take a drink.
When we were going through the notes, you didn't get it, and I was like, what the? This is Lord of the Rings. This is your shit.
I got it. I didn't remember it being brought up in the book.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of things here. This is going to be a bit, and we'll break it up as best we can. But there's a quote here that I think is wonderful to talk about, and the entire component of this hinges on the discussion that Quicksilver has about his capitalist nature, and sort of the stalling of society, right? I think that's important just to frame this up in case you don't exactly recall. So, yet we live in a society modeled after the musings of Bronze Age pedophiles, tossing around mythology bullshit that wasn't made up around a campfire by an Attican farmer depressed that his life was nasty, brutish, and short. So that quote from Quicksilver, specifically the line nasty, brutish, and short, is in reference to the Leviathan, a poem, book, work, and the whole Attican farmer thing, by Thomas Hobbes that describes economies and the social contract of man, sort of the idea behind a stricter governance order that's derived from the power of the Leviathan being the centralized authority of the people. So the Leviathan is cited continually by roughly half of the founding fathers as one of the several documents that helped guide the Constitution of the U.S., the Declaration, and the general ideas of the Republic. It's one of 7 that are frequently talked about, along with Adam Smith and all of those other documents.
Okay.
It fits, of course, that Quicksilver would cite it as to talk about. It fits in directly there. I found it kind of funny, though, that he moves on from the Bronze Age to talk about like the Colonial Age, though, like it is like 1,000+ year jump, almost 1,500 years between the Bronze Age that's so frequently cited and the Colonial Age.
Yeah.
Or 1,700 years ish.
I guess, yes, that makes sense. But I'd like to sort of frame that in the way that we think about dinosaurs, for example.
Sure.
And obviously that's a much more extreme example, but almost all dinosaurs in our mind, for the most part, are like part of the same time period, even though they're millions and millions and millions and millions of years apart from each other in some certain circumstances. So this story taking place is 700 years after the conquering of Earth, which is, it happens, as far as we know, post-America. So probably another few hundred years from present day is when that happens.
Yeah,
so
the general assumption. The general assumption in Golden Sun was that we got to be over 3,000 right now.
Right. So if we're thinking about 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, that's a pretty fair way to think about. Like, yeah, that's generally the same time period. That 1,000-year span. I
mean, there is like a 1,700-year difference is what I was equating between the Bronze Age and the Colonial Age. But the Colonial Age probably just gets lumped in with the American Age or the post-American or the pre. So I remember it being cited once. I think it was the post-American Empire they mentioned.
Yeah, so that's they mentioned post-American Empire, but the American Empire is post.
And I think the Indian king, I think, was referenced at one time, meaning like India, the king of. Well, for some reason,
I don't know about that.
I think that's right.
All I know is the way they describe the American Empire, they made it sound like it was after present day.
Yes, definitely.
Because the 21st century ostentationism was pre-Empire America.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an entire empire that exists in America after present day and before the conquering. Who knows how long that lasts, but
yeah, there is an entirely massive time period there.
Right.
So it definitely is interesting to think about.
I guess my point is I wouldn't read too far into the jump between Bronze and Colonial Age, because from his perspective, they're all kind of technologically advanced brutes. They're literally a different species than he is.
Right. And without touching too much on this, I guess the way that he addresses the different time frames, and the reason that I think that it's kind of ironic, is he mentions the Bronze Age pedophiles and doesn't talk about the colonial slavers, that he's referencing.
Well, yeah.
Which is the time frame that he's, kind of talking about the people from. So to me, that's an interesting breakdown of the time periods.
That is interesting.
So it's small, but I agree with you in terms of the general way that he would think about lumping time together. It would be the stretch of the American Empire. It should be known that Thomas Hobbes was not an American colonialist, but the sort of writings of Thomas Hobbes were popularized around that time. So
actually, let us dig into that a little bit. Are there actually slaves in this society? From a very explicit definition, are any of these...
Reds are slaves for sure.
Are they not paid?
No.
I thought they were paid.
They're given food. They contest for, they do contests for more food.
Okay. Yep. You're right. Never mind.
Yeah.
They're straight up slaves.
Yeah. No, there's definitely most of the lower pyramid are definitely slaves. And the rest is an imperial caste structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. You're right. I was, for whatever reason, I was thinking they were still being paid, just egregiously small amounts. But
no, they're being kept alive to do work.
Yeah. Yep. You're right.
And kept in the dark about it too, which is obviously the worst.
Mm-hmm.
So getting back into the Leviathan, this is kind of the sort of bigger breakdown here. This is going to read very strangely, but a lot of what Pierce Brown put into this little section here is and a lot of what Quicksilver recants is very close to the actual writings of Thomas Hobbes. So the same paragraph that compares, and going to do my best here. It's obviously difficult and we're a little buzzed. So whatsoever therefore is consequent to the time of war, where every man is enemy to every man, the same is consequent to the time, wherein men live without other security than what their own strength and their own invention shall furnish them withal. In such condition, there is no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is uncertain, and consequently no culture of earth, no navigation, nor use of the commodities that may be imported by sea, no commodious building, no instruments of moving, and removing such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time, no arts, no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear, the danger of violent death, and the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. To summarize, these two paragraphs or sections, when you look at them side by side, are very similar.
Yeah.
What Hobbes is saying here is that we stall without invention to some degree. That's a portion of this. And so not fighting against that condition means that society degrades itself over time. That's why he's saying, like, no additional goods, nothing changes, nothing evolves. We're not taking advantage of the things around us so that we as a culture can grow if we stall in these ways, which is exactly what Quicksilver is saying.
Yeah. Yeah, he is. I mean, he even says nasty, brutish, and short, doesn't he?
Yeah, and that's where this entire breakdown comes from, is nasty, brutish, and short, right?
Yeah.
So both of those sentiments end with nasty, brutish, and short. It's not as though I don't believe it's not plagiarism, of course, and I'm not even getting close to suggesting that. But it is very clearly an inspiration to Quicksilver's character.
Well, and probably a background to Quicksilver's character. I would think somebody
Yeah, like we argued.
As tied into the idea of capitalism as he is, I would be surprised if he hasn't read the Leviathan explicitly, probably multiple times.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. I definitely agree. So Quicksilver, fascinating guy, a lot to talk about, but I think we spent a good amount of time on his beliefs, so we'll move on. Mm-hmm. I love the quote here that Darrow kind of throws back in his face, at Sevro's face, saying, "Stop acting like a terrorist," when he pulls out the bombs and he's threatening to blow up the entire moon and everything that's here. Mm-hmm. I mean, not the entire moon, but all of the facilities on the moon.
Everything that makes the moon useful.
Right. It would absolutely hamper the Jackal in every which way, in Quicksilver.
Cripple it.
And we find out that even Darrow obviously doesn't trust Sevro and activated a jam field right when they got in here. I mean, going into chapter 22, between these two chapters, Sevro is very damaged. And we've talked and expounded on that for various reasons, but it comes to kind of manifest and roost all of his anger and rage in this next chapter. Chapter 22, The Weight of Ares. So
heavy dude.
The fight in the hallway between these two is just a great kind of barroom brawl, right? It's just, it's wonderful.
It's clearly written in a way that's maybe not the most realistic kind of fight, but built such great, insane tension behind the detonator. Like, mm-hmm. I wouldn't necessarily think that if a fight were to break out, it would go like this. You know?
I could definitely see it going like this. A couple of punches, hitting each other into the wall, and then dropping to the floor, but Sevro getting him in a...
The accessibility of the detonator is specifically what I'm talking about, and how central to the scene it always is.
That's fair. That is a very cinematic sort of piece of tension.
Exactly. And I'm not,
which isn't to say that like, you're not chasing after.
I think it's beautifully done.
Yeah, this, to be honest, we have a friend, we have a couple of friends named Tim, but one of them, in this moment, the way that Sevro fights reminds me of the way that Tim thinks about fighting people, which is to say a couple of punches, get him to the ground, put him in a triangle, call it a day.
And you say that because that's exactly what happens to me when Tim and I get too drunk together and I challenge him to a fight.
Right. And you're like, I have long arms. And he's like, well, I'm going to get inside your reach and you can't do shit.
Yep. And that's exactly what happens. And then
and that's literally the way this fight
goes. I'm wrapped up like a pretzel and tapping out in like a couple seconds.
Mm-hmm. So the fight ends, of course, with kind of both of them breaking down and tapping out of the fight. And, it's not a fight to the death because they are good friends and he's just kind of lashing out. Severo finally breaking down was so important for his character, I think.
Sorry, I was like finishing my beer right there.
No, it's all good.
Yes, incredibly important. And just a cathartic release of so many emotions and so many thoughts and so many things that has just happened to him that he didn't necessarily have a choice of. Do you think he really had a choice to be Ares?
Severo? No, I think that's specifically kind of what he grapples with here, and obviously the chapter title, "The Weight of Ares."
Yeah,
I don't think he had a choice. I think maybe he. Okay, let me back up. I think he maybe had a choice, and at the beginning he had a choice, but he saw it as an opportunity not to take power, but to be responsible. But then didn't understand the implication of that responsibility.
Yeah, and
kind of the growth of that dimension
very, very quickly, basically immediately.
Yeah, exactly. And grew or changed the Son of Ares to a terrorist adjacent organization, but not outright terror in the same way that Harmony is.
Right, but close, man.
Close, yeah.
And at
the very least, he wasn't thinking about things. He's not thinking.
And he doesn't have a whole, he really doesn't have much of a counsel. So he's approaching this himself, effectively, strategizing himself and doing what he genuinely thinks is necessary and what he can versus should versus has to do, and doesn't have the luxury of somebody else kind of checking his work. So
no, not at all.
He is isolated and alone and way fucking out of his depth.
And to be fair, that's also the way that Darrow was throughout the beginning of Golden Sun before he met up with Fitchner again, right?
Yeah.
He was out of his depth, and then he took the first command that was handed to him, which was Harmony. It's almost like Severo's growth arc is a book behind Darrow's.
It is, but with higher stakes, I think.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
Like similar positions, but the stakes are so much higher because Severo is essentially leading the entirety of the Red people, as opposed to kind of
or trying to inspire them.
Yeah, but leading, like he is overseeing a city filled to the brim with Red refugees.
True.
And making decisions and giving out rations and governing these people. And it is the realization of the sort of hypothetical power that Darrow carried throughout the previous books.
Yeah,
he was still acting and carrying on with this importance, but without the actual risk of just fucking murdering an entire society of people. Whereas Severo is kind of following in those footsteps, but the stakes are so much higher.
Very true. I think the critical difference that you're pointing at is Darrow was ultimately a tool of Ares at the time in Golden Sun.
Yeah.
Severo is Ares. It's the weight of Ares. That's what he's, dealing and reckoning with. The stakes are far elevated.
Yeah.
They're nuclear compared to a gun.
Exactly. So it's going to be tough to compare the two, but in their boiled down form, they're very, very similar.
Yeah. As stated, he's only 23 here, and he's dealing with all of this. And this whole section, we're kind of going to just flow around the different parts of it because I think so much of it is a fluid conversation between them. I really liked right off the bat, you tell anyone I cried, I'll find a dead fish, put it in a sock, hide it in your room, and let it putrefy. It's just great. And he goes from that burst of humor to a reflection of his sort of sense of loneliness at the Institute and how every time he woke up cold and alone, he just wanted to go back to sleep, but he couldn't because he was fighting for his own survival.
Yeah.
And he feels like that every waking moment now, except for it's not only his own survival, it's everyone else too. And his whole breaking down, I don't know what it was this time, but I totally teared up. I got so stressed out by that. Yeah, no, it was.
Wow. I can see it.
It hit me.
I could see it.
Yeah, Severo's he's such an important character. And yeah,
I will say we kind of glossed over it a little bit and laughed about it, but that comment of putting a dead fish in a sock and letting it putrefy after hiding it in someone's room, Darrow's room to be exact, that is kind of a return to the lightheartedness of Severo a little bit. It wasn't a threat of violence. It wasn't a threat of anything actually damaging or anything unhinged. It was something shocking and horrible to do to somebody, but it is really not going to hurt them. Like like he's being the shithead friend that retaliates maybe a little bit too hard, but in a way that's not actually harmful. And that's something that he kind of, that's him at the Institute. That's him at the Academy to the little bit of the extent that we saw, and him earlier on with Severo or with Darrow in general, as opposed to now where he is just weighed down with seriousness and problems and anger and violence and whatever else that he's facing day to day. So seeing him make that joke, even though maybe it's not a joke, but effectively it's a comical threat, and that's not something we've seen from him all book yet.
Absolutely. I think you are so correct. We've gotten some peaceful or like questionable jokes like right off the bat, just more of like a reintroduction to Severo that weren't direct threats, but this is a return to, and we constantly call him this, and it's not accurate, but it's common vernacular. It's a return to kind of the meme lord, as opposed to the
it is not, that's not the right term, but it is. No, but it's the best way to think about it. I think
it's the term that we've used, the endearing term for him for so long, is the unicorn shit porn meme lord.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great to kind of get that return to form. Him being so emotional and talking about that breakdown is a huge deal. It humanizes Severo and makes him more than just a punchline some of the time, or a brutal gut tear.
I think the biggest thing for me that hit me a little bit was his comment on his time at the Institute and how he would look from the bushes and see Darrow and everyone else sitting around the campfire and wanting to go join them, but not feeling like he belonged or would be accepted there. And that is entirely contrasted by our evidence of what Darrow thought of Severo in the first book, in that he was just kind of the loner, and he was loved and respected by Darrow and part of the group, but allowed him, just kind of let him go, be on his own, because one, it allowed for some covert operations that Darrow didn't even know about what was going on, but it was just kind of an outside force that was tactical in a certain respect, but also seemed to be what Severo was comfortable with. So
yeah,
I don't think Darrow had any idea that Severo would have wanted to be with them. It seemed like he was strictly choosing to be on his own out in the woods.
Yeah, I think there's no question that fits kind of the mentality difference between them. And I think getting this reflection back on that moment entirely refracts the part of the Institute that we saw Severo in. I think it's a great little chunk.
Certainly.
I think it's my favorite part of the book so far. It just, like I said, it just hit me this time so differently than it has any other time reading through the book. Loved it. I also really liked the follow-up, which, it hadn't also resonated with me. I think the shittiest, Darrow says this, I think the shittiest part of getting old is now we're smart enough to see the cracks in everything. And that's just so factual. It's not just like the general idea of the loss of innocence or that moment where you flip over into adulthood, be it from some trauma or general aging and wisdom.
It's the process of flipping.
It is potentially the process of flipping, but it's also post-flip. It's the degradation of enjoyment of things, because you start to see the cracks or the faults in things, like your favorite stories or stories that you loved as a kid, or any other number of things that you used to love and enjoy. You just start to see all the faults in them, and you're like, well, shit, why can't I enjoy this anymore?
Yeah, totally.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thought. It's important to note that Pierce Brown was basically our age when he started this series, when he got it published.
Interesting.
Crazy. I don't know. Wild. Young dude. Smart dude. Moving on from that, I liked the very end of this chapter and kind of the commentary that we get on the Veil and sort of the religious discussion, because Severo, in addition to being a person without a home in the Institute, is also a person without a home here now. He doesn't have any family left. His mom died forever ago. His dad just died, and it was Darrow's fault. And Darrow owns it as the fact that it's his fault here. And so he reflects on, in addition to that being a big bummer, he also reflects on sort of the religious implications of the other half of his life, right? Mm-hmm. And he wants to kind of know more or understand or have some sort of sense of hope instilled, because while he generally believes in the dream, it's not, he needs more than the dream. He like really desires a family. He really desires a reason to do what he's doing.
Right. He needs something. And I guess that kind of could lead into the Howlers, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And their oath of Howlers over family and all that.
Well, I think that's why he makes the oath that way, right?
Yeah.
Is because he doesn't have a family, so he's claiming ownership of the secondary family as his primary one, and also everyone else's primary family. He's like, your families don't matter. I am family. We are family. And this is why, ultimately.
Right. Exactly. It's just interesting.
Sold under the guise of loyalty.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to kind of dig into the thought process behind when that rule was made, or when that guideline was made, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, did it date back to the original bits in Golden Sun, of which, to be fair, I think that he was still yearning for a family back in Golden Sun. He had his dad, but he still had so much else missing from his life.
But he never even called him dad. He called him Fitchner.
Right.
He wasn't
or
a
Barca
fatherly figure to him.
Right. He was absent. Even Fitchner says that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because he was running a revolution. Ugh. Severo, man, I feel bad for Severo.
Yep.
Particularly, though, it's nice in kind of the post to say, do you think there's beer in the Vale? And Darrow replies, don't be sacrilegious. Only whiskey streams of it as far as the eye can see. And I think that was drink worthy and a good place to
certainly
take a drink for Severo and his pain. So cheers.
So, 1 second. I ran out of my drink.
Nice little pop sound. I have like a final swig here of this Manhattan, which has whiskey in it, so it counts.
Noble Oak, which is a double oak bourbon. Obviously new toasted oak, and then finished in sherry oak staves. So, cheers.
Cheers for Severo.
For Severo.
Darren and Severo both admit that they don't have the answer of what comes after. So far, they've really only been the machines of this war. And they kind of end on this idea or this note, not necessarily admitted directly between them, but that they need people like Quicksilver and Mustang to guide everything that could come after. They're not going to be the ones to lead what happens after, but they need to be sure that the revolution isn't just the war that they've been seeking this whole time.
Right. They need to be a little bit more than that.
With that, we move into chapter 23, The Tide. I have a feeling that this is going to be... We already had a long section. I think that this is going to be just as long.
Yeah.
But it is a wonderful chapter. One of my favorites in the book, to be honest. Just kind of the writing of this is just beautiful. Mm-hmm. So... Chapter 23. My God, everyone right away at the beginning, this could have been its entire own chapter with the Howlers. Everyone pulling out their suicide teeth. While a great bonding moment is gruesome, and then fucking Ragnar, man.
He pulls it out with his fucking bare hands, not waiting for the pliers.
How big do you think his molars are? We could ask Bingham, but like if you had to guess.
We should ask Bingham. If I had to guess, standard ice cube?
Oh my God, no way. Not an ice cube.
Half an ice cube.
Maybe. Yeah. I'd say like an average thumbnail. I feel like it'd be like an average thumbnail.
That's like my tooth size.
No, maybe.
I have a small mouth.
I don't know.
I have such a small mouth that I had to get one of my front teeth removed from my bottom row of teeth in order to allow my teeth to actually like have space, because they were so fucking overcrowded. And I'm still pretty sure my giant ass thumbnail is the size of one of my molars.
All right, fine. We're going to have to ask Bingham to sort that out. Still ridiculous, gross, big tooth. Great bonding moment, though. The idea of like pulling out these teeth basically to symbolize that they're not going to give up or surrender, that's no longer an option. Mm-hmm. And that they're not even going to think about it because it's not worth it.
Not only that, I think beyond the not being worth it, just putting them in a different place mentally. Darrow mentions them kind of having the weight of a death that's already been written. Like,
lifted.
Yeah. It's incredibly heavy to have something like that constantly. And it also makes them feel like more of a terrorist cell than a legitimate army.
Yeah, or at the very least, like a spy organization to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Versus an army. Because that is kind of a shadowy thing, terrorist or otherwise.
But it certainly dehumanizes each of the Howlers.
Without question. It's definitely dehumanizing.
Yeah. So
we also get the like reassertion here. It's important just to mention. We get the reassertion that Darrow is now in charge and Severo is now Howler 2. So Howler 2 and Howler 1 are established here, and that's the way the power structure will be.
So I didn't quite take it as in charge versus not in charge. I took it more as...
Well, the hierarchy, right?
If you want to get very, very technical about it, Darrow is ahead of Severo, but neither of them are an external leader of the Howlers. They are both Howlers, and they are probably going to take input from all of the Howlers to make decisions. Mm-hmm. If need be, they can override it based on like rank of Howler 1, Howler 2, whatever. But the way it was described made it seem more like we're one team, and I'm not leading you. You are a part of the same team that I'm a part of, and we're making decisions together. Mm-hmm. That's the way that they framed it. That's the vibe I got off of it.
Fair. And, to me, that makes sense. Mm. I mean, I find it interesting. This book here plays a lot so far with orders and moments that aren't being captured by the writing in the moment, right? Being a first-person perspective book, we miss a lot of scenes. But then we see scenes right after something like the military briefing here. We don't see the briefing itself. It kind of helps fuel the mystery and the action that is to come, which is a great way to keep attention and keep the pages turning, and feels like a screenwriter technique.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. It seems very much like a cinematic writing kind of style, where you see them go in and start planning, but don't see what the plan is. But then you approach the action scene knowing that there's a plan in place, but still getting the satisfaction of seeing the scene unfold without knowing what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I guess I don't have enough experience to know if that's a typical tactic by authors, but it is certainly a very, very good tactic used by screenwriters.
What I find really interesting, and this is, I don't like to bring in kind of the meta perspective or thought a whole lot outside of our intro and outro episodes, but I think it's important to maybe talk about it here. This decision is more prevalent in this book than most of the other books, because Pierce Brown is also becoming a screenwriter and other things like that, and is starting to kind of focus on some of that inside of his life. And I think that this is not a common practice in the first person narrative, right? Mm-hmm. Missing that time gap can mean that you miss all kinds of things. That doesn't mean I agree with it, but I don't at all agree with that criticism at all. I think that it's stupid. I think that it's ridiculous. I think that it is people placing expectations of a medium on the medium when a medium can surprise you if it's pulled off correctly. And I think that he pulls it off excellently.
Yeah. I think it's really well done. I guess the one thing I want to know is, did this go according to plan?
And it seems to have.
It seems to have. And I guess typically they do, like Darrow does a pretty good job of being surprised or having a monologue that says otherwise when something goes off of the plan.
Yes, like we find in the next chapter. Love the technique, though. I think that it's great, and I think that it's good to talk about and emphasize it as kind of a highlight of the first-person style that Pierce is exploring here.
Right.
We move into the call with the jackal, which I think is great. His threat to Darrow is just dripping with seriousness. It's phenomenal.
Oh, certainly.
Was there anything that felt particularly real or fear-inspiring to you? I mean, just kind of the general general vibe.
How cold he was.
Mm-hmm.
And how everything he said was so calculated and so intentional. There was nothing that seemed to really catch him off guard. And maybe that's just his composure, but he seemed to be still one step ahead of everybody in that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, the Jackal consistently feels like he's one step ahead of the bad guy. That was a shitty joke.
What
anyway,
the fuck, Crossland?
I had to bring. You said one step ahead, and I was like, Aladdin. That's the joke.
That's not what I was referencing.
That's the next joke. No, I know you weren't even referencing it. My brain went to the reference for you. And I love the descriptions of the hollows. I think that the hollows are wonderfully described. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a beautiful image of all these like cages stacked up. And I think it gets back to what we were talking about last week about the sort of layout of Phobos and how they managed to fit so many people in. And the idea of these small cages that contain each individual person and, like a press grill floating around and everything else is chaotic, futuristic, and hurts me to think that people live this way.
Yeah. I mean, but people do.
Right.
A whole lot of them do.
It's unfortunate.
It is.
Without a doubt.
Certainly.
We find out, though, shortly thereafter, that the revolution will be televised as Quicksilver has taken over and hijacked all of the TVs for the Sons of Ares and the HCs that are floating everywhere. I said TVs, HCs that are floating everywhere.
Did they say televised?
No, okay. But I'm saying it here. The revolution will be televised.
I was curious about that.
Which, it's just ultimately it's
what would that
funny because
be here?
Will be canned, maybe?
Holocomized?
I would just say would be canned because it's on the holo can, right?
Is it can or cam?
Holo can.
Is it CAN?
Yeah.
Didn't realize that. I thought it was holocam.
Holocan is a large mounted device that shows the images three-dimensionally.
Huh.
They are cubical with images displayed on all sides, typically found in pubs or bars.
Interesting. Yep. Like me.
But yeah, so it will be televised, right? The revolution will be televised. The bit that I lose my shit here again. God damn it! Reliving the scene of the death of Io from the beginning as this preamble to what is clearly about to devolve into conflict is just beautiful. I love the return and hearing or like listening to some degree Darrow grovel as his old self as the Red, begging for her not to be executed. That just hurts.
Yeah, I was expecting the speech to more explicitly call out who he was in it, but I was really happy with the way he addressed and referred to the recording in his monologue afterwards.
Yeah.
Like I was expecting something along the lines of that woman was my wife and that young meager boy that pulled on her legs was me, and I've grown and I've become more formidable and I'm angry and something like that. But I think the monologue that he put forward was probably better than that. I'm happy with it.
Without a doubt. I think that as well, starting his speech here with one of the first lines from the other book, I would have lived in peace, but my enemies brought me war, is just brilliant. It's spine-tingling again. There are few first lines of novels that stick with me. There are three that stand out to me. This one from The Dark Tower, and the line from The Thief of Always. But it is, man, just unforgettable.
Yeah, really cool.
So he goes off into almost a sermon for everyone, just talking about the revolution and what needs to be done for them. He internally monologues about the people being a weapon that is more similar to a tide of people pushing against these gears that are going to be fighting as a mass of flesh, not as a weaponized anything. These are riots, really, truly. And that's sort of the weapon of war here. The line that I also love that's kind of a call out to something else as well is, never mind the night you summon, we will rage against it. And while not a direct call out, it feels like it's plucked straight out of Dylan Thomas's Do Not Go Gentle, which If you don't know, the final lines are very commonly heard or referred to. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. And the way that whole thing is paced just sounds like that.
But also, I mean, rage being the name of the section, right? On top of, there's a whole lot there that points to that being the direct inspiration for that quote.
I mean, if we've talked about this before, Pierce Brown pulls in universe quotes for the beginning of his sections. If you were to pull an out of universe quote, it would be that one to put at the beginning of this section, I think.
Yeah.
It's the most logical. It connects directly. It gets across the theme. It's right there.
I think you're right.
Instead, we get shit escalates, which is great. But,
can't complain about that, I suppose.
Nah. And if we fall, others will take our place because we are a tide and we are rising. Yes. And then all shit breaks loose. All hell.
Yep, the levees have broken.
This chapter is so fucking cinematic. We kind of talked about it on the beginning half, but he is literally referencing cameras and shots and greens turning cameras on different people around the scene. I mean, even in the next chapter, the chapter after that, I think it might be 25, we follow a gold, right? We're watching a gold from the outside of the yacht that they're flying in. And that feels very cinematic in the way that everything's breaking down around her. Just so much of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the almost experiencing a suicide of a gold, but very suddenly, oh no, not in camera angle anymore. It was well done, heavy, and conveyed the weight of the scene. I think in a real way. It's kind of tough to describe.
Yeah, and even all of the other colors that are in the cages getting out and turning and looking at the HC and starting this kind of revolution as the greens show what's going on here, and it spreads to all of the other planets and everything else. It's fantastic. You can imagine the montage with the voiceover of the speech.
Oh,
right?
For sure. Certainly.
It's wonderful. And even cutting to the image of Ragnar in bone white armor is wonderful. It's just so great. And it should be stated that this type of revolution is one of the inferences of the Leviathan written by Hobbes. The sort of idea that people accumulate to a mass that is the government or the acting decision making, and you have to create a strict form of government that keeps people in the line that you want them to be in. Otherwise, it's likely that the form will take the worst opposite shape if it's repressed for too long. Fascinating shit. Just wonderful. Anything else on this chapter?
No.
Cool. Chapter 24, Hic sunt leones. I got rereading this, obviously I know what's going to happen, but for whatever reason I was like, I wonder if PJ is juggling the idea of, is this Adrius or is this Mustang right off the bat with that title?
I didn't. I don't think anyone really considers Adrius to be a lion, including himself. I think he's been well established as being ousted from his family. I don't think he considers himself to be part of that core part of that family that has the lion sigil. And the sort of idea of Hic sunt leones never really applied to him at any point, but it did for Mustang. So I immediately thought Mustang. Maybe I got to the right answer with the wrong work, but
No, I mean, I think
that's the logic I followed.
That's a valid thought. I guess my only other thought is that we haven't really heard or seen. I mean, we heard a little bit from Cavax earlier about Mustang, but we didn't get the strictest picture. And we did most recently speak with the Jackal and know that potentially the Bone Riders are on the way and other things like that. So I was curious.
Well, so we also already knew that Mustang was meeting with Quicksilver, and we knew that Quicksilver is a son of Ares. There's just a whole lot to it that made me not consider anything other than that referring to Mustang.
Makes sense to me. Darrow's off on a very different quest, though, than the revolution that's happening here. Severo is going to fight in that rebellion. He's going to manage that. Darrow is leaving to rally the Obsidians with Ragnar.
Yes.
And we get a phenomenal scene, kind of a lot of mentality around this sort of idea of this yacht and the abilities of the yacht. But then Ragnar shows up and offers the stains of Priam's mom, the sub-governor of Phobos. And wow, it's awesome and interesting, you know, because she wasn't going to bow, which is ultimately why he decided to do it, you know?
Right, exactly. And I don't know, Ragnar is, I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but he's one of my favorite characters in every single scene that includes him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He is a very interesting, very intriguing character. I'm glad that we get so much of him here and that he was expanded on, you know, from his role in Golden Sun, which is really just, you know, a lieutenant to some degree.
Right. But necessarily so. We needed a way to build trust with him and from him. And that's going to take time no matter what.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So something we wanted to correct when we hit kind of this section, we noticed another statement that said Sigil barren hands. And in the original notes, I wrote, which is it? And we were trying
because of something I pointed out.
Yeah,
early on.
It was something that PJ had pointed out before, and we kind of like juggled whether or not it was right in canon or maybe it was an adjustment or a mistake that was made in the text.
Yeah. So I had been struggling with the fact that Kieran's daughter and then the guys in the infirmary were all kind of talking about the sigils on Darrow's hands, and I was so certain that there was a comment earlier on that said that his hands were barren of sigils, that they had been removed. I found the point where it says that, and it's the fucking dream when he's in the veil. So
yeah,
it does not apply to his actual physical body. That's my
right.
bad.
So it was a dream without colors, right? And so that was kind of
it was him walking through the veil. Right.
It was a DMT hit.
Yeah, it was. I think that's the best way to describe it, scientifically. But you know, mostly I was gonna say at the very least he thinks he's walking through the veil. I think it's a dream. It is a dream. It's a dream. Right. It's him dreaming, but in that dream he is so convinced that it's real, and he is walking through the bridge that he talks about to the veil. Yeah, totally. Exactly how he described it, that his loved ones would be calling him from the other side over the bridge, and it's without a doubt it's Uncle Neril calling him, and it's just him being sleepy. Just him being sleepy, so sleepy, so tired. So tired. I'm so tired. And then Mustang. So we go from correcting her mistake to Mustang being here, showing up, and man, there's a lot that they unpack in this scene. Nah, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, it reads straightforward, but emotionally, they unpack a lot. Of course, it's a lot. But they do it very quickly, and I think that makes sense for those two. They're. Mm-hmm. At least Darrow isn't the most emotional person, and really neither is Mustang. They can both show emotions, but I think the fact that they show emotions to each other is a pretty rare thing. It doesn't seem like there's many people that they are both kind of in tune with. Yeah, definitely. I think that this is kind of a resolution of the theme of trust from the previous book. Yeah. Wherein, you know, Darrow obviously placed a lot of trust in her with the information, and now Mustang needs to earn back the trust. Right. She also completely buys into the idea, predicts even Darrow's plan about going to go get the Obsidians because he doesn't have an army, because he can just read his fucking mind. But she says, to build, we must break. I was listening. Talking about the speech, which, you know, is phenomenal. She embodies Eo's dream, and we kind of get that understanding. She was raised that way by Cavax to begin with. Right. With all of her talk of trust, do you trust her? I do. I think I do. I think there were enough opportunities that there are too many coincidences that you could hand wave away saying that she was plotting and like waiting for a better opportunity later down the line to spring a betrayal of some sort. But there's too much of that to have any of it make sense. Like it seems like the most logical possibility is that she's on his side. And that's even reinforced by the fact that she reached out to Severo, and that's known now. Mm-hmm. The fact that she was meeting with Quicksilver, and Quicksilver is a son of Ares, even though she doesn't necessarily know that. The fact that Quicksilver would be trusting enough to set up a meeting with her says a lot as well, knowing how careful he is. Like, there's just so much that would go against the idea of her being untrustworthy here.
Fair. I think that it's a good point. I mean, the only thing that I see is, generally speaking, people who say they are a thing are generally trying to sell you on the opposite. You know?
What do you mean?
I think that they have enough. Well, it's the whole show don't tell concept, you know, for the most part. And I think that also applies. Like, if someone says that they're loyal because they were a Boy Scout, for instance.
Well, okay, but she didn't start the conversations saying that she was trustworthy. This was all kind of in response to her being questioned about being trustworthy, which I think is a very different way you approach those questions or approach those accusations.
But she's also very political, right? Yeah. I think she does earn the trust even within the chapters that we're here to talk about yet. But I think if we would have ended here, we might have a different consensus, you know?
Yeah, that's fair.
Because I think she earns it when she pulls Ragnar out a little bit later.
She does. That's true. But at the same time, why come back here now? After everything we've heard from Cavex, and after the sort of showdown at Quicksilver's tower, what nefarious motivation could she have to come back now?
She very specifically says...
Explicitly alone.
Right, she is explicitly alone. What I'm saying is that she very explicitly says that she wants to keep a thumb on him, like wants to be there with him, and isn't willing to send anyone else. And so I think that is another layer of a potential reason to not trust her. I think that she does earn the trust, and I think that she also deserves the trust in the end. But I think that there's every right to, at the very least, question her motivations, because she is such a pragmatic and advantageous thinker, albeit in a very different way than Adrius is.
Yeah, that's true. She's a fucking genius. So, you know, hard to argue with that.
Yeah, she could have her way with Darrow, and Darrow wouldn't even know what's going on. Mm-hmm. Which is a sad, unfortunate reality for Darrow.
I mean, part carving, part proclivity to pegging, I guess.
God. Okay, chapter 25, Exodus. I like how you just completely downplayed that. Jesus. Okay, so chapter 25, Exodus. I love that Ragnar quotes a fictional book of quotes from Lorne back to Darrow here. It's just fantastic.
Yep. I mean, it was essentially him reciting meditations.
Yep.
Effectively, that's what he was doing, right?
Exactly. It's like Lorne wrote his own meditations, basically.
Well, but that's what it is. Stoneside's, that book, is, as far as I understood, supposed to be meditations, because Lorne is Marcus Aurelius in this story.
No, very fair point to take it literal and very direct. I think that is definitely the correct take. It's just funny how direct it is, you know?
Like, very direct.
It's not even playing coyly with it.
No. But I don't think he's ever been cheeky with the Marcus Aurelius connections. It's always been,
only once or twice.
With the exception of the name of Severo, which I asked Pierce Brown about, and he never responded.
So, bastard.
Well, not a bastard. He's a busy dude. He's writing a new book that will
I'm sure that's
get released at some point in our lifetime.
Correct. Hopefully it finishes out the saga with a nice little bow.
It'd be pretty cool if it gets released right as we get done with...
Yeah. Did you have to check?
Well, okay. I never remember if Iron Gold or Dark Age is, like, what order those two are.
You know, it's maybe good to note here that the next two books are so fucking big compared to this one. We have 10 episodes for Morningstar, and we have 9 for Golden Sun, and we've got like 6 or 7 for Red Rising. But like Iron Gold is going to be like 14 fucking episodes, and
Dark Age is going to be
like 20. Like it's It's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack. But okay, so getting back to kind of the idea here, we find out from the transmission with Victra that the revolution is working. The rebellions are popping up all over the place, all over the solar systems.
Mm-hmm. Which
it's
that's
a clear sign.
Important.
Mm-hmm. Victra also reiterates the lack of trust that she has in Mustang.
I felt that was really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, there's the argument that Victra went through so much to earn the trust, earn her trust within this circle. But at the same time, her main argument is the exact sticking point in what she'd been fighting against the entire time while she was trying to prove herself, which is she comments on Mustang's brother and father and who they are, and therefore who Mustang must be. And yes, the fact that she's not Adrius or Nero doesn't mean that she's immediately trustworthy, but of all people, Victra should understand that who you're familially tied to doesn't define who you are.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that she should immediately trust her because of that, but that seems like a really strange argument to focus on from Victra.
While I see where you're coming from, I think that she's got at the very least a valid point, and I think that the difference here is that Victra has fully baked and earned her trust in terms of the sacrifices that she's put in and the hell that she's been through and still being here with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I see that.
I get that. And I'm not trying to downplay what she's gone through, but if she's going to make an argument for why not to trust Mustang, it seems weird that argument is who her brother and father were.
I do totally get where you're coming from. I see the immediate irony of that, but I just raise the fact that Victra has earned the trust regardless of her station or family. I believe that you believe that. I'm just making the argument.
Yeah, I think, and I think it's completely valid for Victra to not trust Mustang. And I think there are many, many, many reasons why that would be the case. I think from Victra's perspective, who her father and brother are should be the bottom of the list of why not to trust Mustang. That's my point. Why is that the thing that she focused on? I'm not at all doubting her feelings or her thoughts or her opinions. It's the motivation and the reasoning that she
Mustang
highlights.
has also always said family first, though, and that was her entire life for so long.
That's okay. That's a good point. That's something I hadn't considered, and completely breaks down that argument.
That's not to say that Victra knows that. Of course, that's just kind of an intimate thing between Darrow and Mustang. But I think that it's valid to consider. But I'm on your side.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say that Victra should just trust Mustang because she's not who her brother or father are. I'm just saying that's an ironic thing to focus on.
Mm-hmm. Of course. So we get kind of the picture of what we're going to accomplish when going to the peaks. The Asgard station idea just seems so cool. It's so similar to Olympus and the Institute. Another element of kind of the golden control over the Obsidians. What do you think of kind of the Asgard thing?
It was so fucking cool. The idea of it's so cool. I had a very similar visual idea of Asgard as I did with Olympus, in that it's some artificially floating base that allows for very easy oversight and I guess surveillance of the groups below them. But man, I just thought it was cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super super cool, very interesting. Hopefully we get to see it soon. We don't see it this week, but hopefully soon.
We don't.
A civilian ship creeps up on them and starts to fire. And, this is kind of something that throws them off as they're starting to look out at the spires and everything else. They're being hunted by another ship that appears to be a civilian ship. Ragnar gets really aggressive, fires a rocket out of the other ship while shouting like he does. It's just such a Darrow move. Fucking love it.
I felt like it was more of a Severo move.
Fair. Okay.
That's an angry, aggressive, spur of the moment move more than anything else. I could see Darrow doing it, but I think he'd be a little bit more grand about the gesture and go for the starsuit execution instead.
Just launch through their ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Fair enough. And then they lose engines, they lose control, and they collide with the ice. You move into... Go ahead.
What?
Oh, it sounded like you were going to say something.
Oh, no.
We move into chapter 26, The Ice. And I like kind of the idea of the crash webbing, basically just jumping out of the ceiling or the walls like an emergency seatbelt / airbag.
You and I talked about this a while, trying to decide if it came out of their suits or out of the vehicle itself. And I think you and I both kind of landed on the idea that it came out of the vehicle, almost like an airbag. I'm still trying to figure out how that works, but it's super fucking cool to think about.
Yeah, and it feels more plausible than a lot of other spaceship crashes. You know,
don't see
like
this in other spaceship crashes.
No, not at all. The closest you get is like an ejector seat, you know, and something like an X-wing.
Maybe,
yeah, and that's a big maybe.
Even
like in Star Trek,
everyone flying X-wings doesn't have an airtight suit on.
Nope.
So they just have ejector seats for no real practical reason.
Right. Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting thing, and I'm glad that this is kind of it's kind of that exploration that we talked about, and I think Red Rising treads the line between trying to do some hard sci-fi elements, and I think it should be noted that the sequel series is a little bit harder sci-fi. But it definitely it still has like soft sci-fi, and this feels like an element of encroaching on and trying to make it feel more real, even if it's not necessarily perfectly accurate.
Right.
You could imagine this working.
Yeah, for sure. For sure you could.
Yeah. So these next couple chapters are going to be pretty short as far as conversations go, but Mustang, Darrow, and Holiday all make it out of the hole, but Ragnar is missing. Holiday refuses to let Darrow go, shooting right in front of his foot, even flashing Trigg's pistol, saying, it's not worth it.
She shoots Trigg's pistol.
Yeah, right
in front of his face.
Right in front. Right.
Like, she's very clearly making a statement about this, and it makes total sense. Like, the thing that her justification for sacrificing her brother's life is something that Darrow is completely ignoring and not making decisions based on. Like, Ragnar's not the mission, sure, but also at the same time, kind of going backwards on that, I don't think this mission happens without Ragnar.
Definitely. And obviously, Ragnar is very important to the mission, but the mission might be accomplished with Darrow by other means.
Maybe. That's tougher, though. That's way tougher.
What I'm saying is that I think that Holiday is looking outside of the picture of recruiting the Obsidians and is more like...
just straight in survival mode?
Yeah, okay. Straight survival mode. Not so much as though the end goal of recruiting the Obsidians is easy without Ragnar. I agree with you. I think that it's more straight survival. Like, okay, well, without Ragnar, we can't get the Obsidians. So plan D. What do we do next?
Yeah.
Go to the Rim, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
But before we really get resolution here, she can't stop Mustang from diving in after Ragnar. And I considered ending the chapter, the read of the week here, but I decided that would be too cruel. So I let us read the next chapter.
Yeah.
What do you think about Mustang diving in after him?
Honestly, I didn't think a whole lot about her diving in after him, other than more solidifying evidence that she's actually on Darrow's side, legitimately.
Yeah, it's the moment of trust. She's regaining some of that trust through this moment,
right?
Affirming that.
Yeah, and
so we move into.
But I don't think that's her motivation either. Mm-hmm. I think her motivation is probably more in trying to fulfill the mission that they set out initially to complete, which is recruit the Obsidians from Ragnar's home.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she understands that Ragnar is way more important than anything else in that goal.
Totally agree. I think that it is also a moment of trust, regardless of the sort of base the decision to value Ragnar's life means that she cares about the Rising. And so in both ways, it's a great moment of trust. So chapter 27, The Bay of Laughter. She finds Ragnar and they rescue him, pull him out of the hole. Phew, stressful a little bit there. We almost lost a character this week. Would have been bad. But those giant man-eating, I wrote in the script slugs, but they're described as snails.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about this early on, like in the intro. I wrote my intro initially planning to talk about this. I'm pretty sure this is a typo.
Or at the very least, a misrepresentation.
No, I think it's a straight up typo.
Misdescription.
Because I think everything that he describes about these like creatures makes them seem like slugs. But he calls them snails. And there's nothing talking about their shell or like a big hump resembling a shell or anything like that. Like it seems almost like a leech, which is, I mean, like a thick leech is essentially what a slug is. So I think it's just
at least by description.
Typo, calling it a snail instead of a slug.
I would agree. So typo to me just means that you misspelled something. So I think you just defined it wrong.
Mistake.
Yeah.
Then.
Right.
Typo in the idea that he was thinking about the creature, and slugs and snails are so similar, and closed his eyes and started typing and said snail instead of slug.
Yeah. It's a small thing, but it's there. But man, they're terrifying though. I mean, imagining them as a slug with all of these different mouths on the back and everything else, and sort of the idea of it being a sprinting, it says snail, but I'm going to call it a slug, kind of like chasing after. It's just, ugh. Badness.
Pretty gross.
Very bad.
Pretty gross.
Yeah, very gross. So after that dramatic sequence, Ragnar wakes up and, having his chest pounded on and everything else. And he says, "Not yet, All-Mother, not yet," in, bold text like he usually does. And for the second week in a row, Ragnar has avoided death.
Yep. Yes, he has.
Oh, shit.
As he should, though.
Yeah.
I really like Ragnar.
Yes. Yes. I would agree.
Well, I think probably my favorite character at this point.
It's fair. So Ragnar also gives us a lot of information about sort of the society in the winter and the way that things are right now. And the ears of men here, the cast out of the obsidian, sound horrifying.
Yeah, they do. The eaters of men sound like fucking terrifying. Just horrifying things.
Just badness. Just badness.
Yep.
So my final question is also a prediction here for you going into your predictions.
Ooh,
but
okay.
I figure giving you time to elaborate on this one a little bit more makes sense. So who do you think was in the other ship? Do you agree that it was Cassius? It's kind of left as a big question mark at the end of this section.
So Mustang believes it's Cassius, and I am inclined to believe her and agree with her. I don't agree with her posit that Aja could have been on the ship as well. I think this seems... The fact that it's a single ship following makes me think that either there are other ships out in orbit somewhere, and Aja's among them, or this was a sort of spur of the moment chase by Cassius that wasn't necessarily approved by Aja or the Sovereign in general. I'm more inclined to think that way, that this is decisions by Cassius without the others in mind.
I can't help but feel the same about this entire section. That entire question, I should say. And sort of the question that you get and the base idea that Mustang has about why it would be Cassius chasing makes so much more sense. Fundamentally was meeting, was in a stealth craft. All of that lines up.
Right. Exactly.
But then she also plants the opposite seed, which is like maybe Aja's there.
She does. And that felt more like a panic thought process being externalized more than anything else.
Gotcha. Cool. Anything else?
No.
Cool.
Nothing else.
Well, then with that, we'll move. It's a long episode. With that, we'll move into the predictions for the week. So like you just said, I'm just going to recount your answer. Who do you think was in the other ship? Do you agree that it was Cassius? You basically said likely Cassius. You don't think Aja is involved due to kind of the circumstances surrounding
Correct.
the event.
Yep.
Okay. So next question then. How will Aaliyah Snow Sparrow, Ragnar's mom, react to his return?
I think that's going to be very similar. Like the scene of Ragnar interacting with his mother, based on how she's described, is going to seem very similar to the interaction of Darrow with his mother at the end of Golden Sun. So cold and calculated, but still showing love and support for their child.
Okay.
Just the way she's been described, she doesn't sound like a super loving person.
Yeah, definitely. It's fair. Okay. What about the rest of the Obsidians? I almost said Obsidians, but Obsidians.
I think a similar way. I think having Ragnar there and demonstrating the lies that they've been told, I think will go a long way in disenchanting the propaganda placed in the minds of the Obsidians by the Golds.
Fair. Checks out. Reaction of Sephi, meaning the general, similar question, the other name on the list, Sephi the Quiet, his sister.
I think it's going to be something kind of similar to Kieran in meeting back up with Darrow. It's going to be a little bit more emotional, a little bit less cold than that interaction with his mother. And I think that will instill a lot of inspiration and hope for succeeding in recruiting a lot of the Obsidians.
Checks out. Final question. Do they all make it to Tinos / away from the pole after recruiting the Obsidians? Provided it goes correctly. We assume you're predicting that we recruit the Obsidians.
I'm assuming we recruit the Obsidians. I think, yes, they make it back. No, they don't all make it back. I think the casualties will be in the ranks of the people that they've just recruited. I think most of the main characters will. I think all of the main characters from here to where you're speaking about, like next section, will survive.
Got it. Okay. Anything else you want to say on this week or predictions?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered pretty much everything. I think this was good.
Next week, we'll be reading chapter 28 through 34, which is through the end of part 2, Rage. So finish up Rage for next week.
Be done with Rage.
Yeah, it's actually one of our shortest sections that we've ever done on the podcast. So it's a nice little chunk. We'll talk about it ad nauseum, and it'll be a good time.
Perfect.
Cool. So that's where we'll leave you for the week. Continue to refer to any of your friends and family. Go ahead, leave us a review on whatever platform, subscribe, etc. You know the drill. We want to be in as many ear holes as possible, and we'd love your assistance in going down that path.
Yeah. So we've got a pretty swanky website put together by our great friend Tim Olson, our graybeard Linux guru, put together this website for us, and also independently hosts all of our episodes, which is pretty fucking sweet. But the website hosts all of the pictures and recipes for the drinks that we have on the website, as well as just links to social media and a whole bunch of other stuff. It looks gorgeous, and I love it. I I really genuinely do love that website for us. Social media at website wordsandwhiskey.show. Wordsandwhiskey.show is that website. Social media, we've got Words Whiskey Pod on both Twitter and Instagram. We're pretty active on there. That's where we actually started interacting with High Key Obsessed podcast, which we mentioned we were just featured on this today. Today it got released. Today, as in the day we're recording this, but it would have been the week before, the Monday before this gets released is when that got published. But we're High Key Obsessed podcast. The most recent episode is Crossland and I shooting the shit with Thomas.
Mm-hmm. It's a great time. So as PJ mentioned, follow us on social media, comment, interact. We'd love to hear from you. Any additional questions or any questions that you want me to pose to PJ, you can send to our email or to us through Instagram or Twitter. Our email is wordsandwhiskeyshow@gmail.com. And continue to listen. We will see you next Thursday with chapter 28 through 34. Thanks for listening.